Hello, my name is Greg Massey, and this is episode number 58 of The Color of Air, a podcast about the musical journey. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a hell of a week here at Retcon Industries, but I thank you for taking the time to download this podcast and listen to it. So my guest today is the wonderful Eden Rayz. I first became aware of Eden as the vocalist of local death metal band Scaphism. But come to find out, she is a classically trained cellist and has been working on a lot of solo material besides her main death metal projects, Scaphism and Angel Grinder. And she was kind enough to share her upcoming EP with me called Corpus Vice. And I believe this is going to be a tremendous release that's going to be coming out this year. Still no definitive release date, but yeah, Eden has always been super kind, super fun to be around, super supportive with the different music stuff she's involved in, and she's just one of the most terrifying death metal singers I've ever seen too, which is really, really funny. And we talk about that a little bit in this interview. But she's immensely talented, immensely creative, and I was really happy to talk with her and get to hear her journey from studying in the Suzuki method as a kid to Berklee College of Music to Boston Conservatory to Scaphism, Angel Grinder, and now to her new EP, Corpus Vice. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and to give you a sample of what you can expect from Corpus Vice, here's the track, St. Anthony's Fire.
Between hearts
I guess starting off, I wasn't sure where to go or where to start. I guess I don't really know much about your history. I know your bands and I know who you are now, but where does your story start?
Oh, goodness. That is a fantastic question. Um, Really, I mean, early, I was a what they call a Suzuki kid. So it's this process of sort of indoctrinating very little, tiny, moldable string players around, they start as early as 2 or 3 sometimes. I started at 4.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I started at 4 on the Suzuki track, which is, they have these books that are preset of very specific songs, and they're taught in very specific ways. And in some places they have these terrifying like armies of tiny children playing like Twinkle Twinkle completely accurately with perfect intonation, the same bowings, the same fingerings, and it's really interesting, and it's a great technique. Honestly, it's a great way of training children to play in a technically sound way. So I started that way, and thankfully I had a teacher who was very progressive, and her name was Sherry McMurtry, and we very quickly evolved into improvisation. I always had this very like questioning mind, and I was like, why do we do it this way? Why can't we do it this way? And instead of saying, go back, you have to do it this very particular way, do it again, she was very much she would answer my questions, and she would allow me to experiment. So I very quickly started improvising, started making strange sounds, and she encouraged it. And it never stopped. So that's pretty much a microcosm of my career, is experimenting and not stopping and pushing the boundaries and questioning.
Yeah, and making strange sounds.
Oh yeah, plenty of
Yeah.
them. As many as possible.
Well, that I'm glad to hear that because what I've been doing is as I've been doing these interviews, I've been kind of noticing patterns and I've been noticing things that I find interesting about in different kind of commonalities. And one thing I always was curious about, especially for someone who comes from a classical background, is exactly that, is the relation of the classical performer to improvisation, because there are some people like yourself that take to it. There are some people who get so wired into that classical mindset that when you ask them to improvise, it's a source of anxiety. And so
Absolutely.
I'm always curious where the path goes. And I think one of the commonalities between, because I talked to somebody else who he plays fretless classical guitar,
Mm.
and the way he approached it too was kind of the same thing as you. Is like, I had a really progressive teacher who encouraged these things, and I think that's where the line is is it comes down to the teacher aspect, because yeah, you can have a teacher who's by the book, and then you know or you can have someone who's open to that. And considering you are a teacher,
Mhm.
how did that your student experience influence your teaching experience?
Oh man, I love that question. I've had so many absolutely different and brilliant teachers over the years, and all of them play a significant role in who I am as a teacher and in my pedagogy. I think, in the spirit of, speaking to what you were referring to with the teachers that are making the children stay by the book, some children, it's just not in their personality type to do what they're told. And those are some of my favorite students, is, as much as, we try to keep them on a path where they're going to have healthy practice techniques and healthy performance techniques, and in their mindset as well, they will go their own way. And if you try to bring them back on the path aggressively, they're going to more aggressively push away from that. And that's a beautiful thing, I think. But I think the teachers that really fed into the way that I now approach my lessons. I had a teacher in high school named Ida Mercer, who was out of the Cleveland Music School settlement. I grew up in Cleveland. And she is an absolutely brilliant classical cellist. She plays in some wonderful ensembles. Just a genuinely kind and but also very strict teacher. She did not sugarcoat things, and she was honest. And I think especially, I don't teach a lot of kids nowadays, but especially in teaching kids in the U.S., we're very much taught to like sugarcoat things. Like even if they completely messed it up, that was a great job. You did a great job. And I don't think anyone's learning anything from that. You know, you can say that was a good effort, but where can the process change because that wasn't accurate? And I think students respond to honesty more than sugarcoating things. And I remember a very particular lesson. I was preparing for college auditions. I was probably 16 or 17, and I was playing, I think I was playing the Haydn C major cello concerto for one of those auditions. And I was not practicing well. I wasn't practicing accurately. I wasn't really doing what I was supposed to do. And it was very out of character for her. And she stopped me. She's like, okay, that was terrible. And I was like, oh shit, I guess I really have to work differently. And like, it really got my ass in gear. And I'll forever remember that moment because she's just the sweet, this kindest, most genuine soul. And her just being honest and saying, you know what, that sucked. You got to do it again. Was
Yeah.
really the moment where I felt like I think of that a lot with my students when they're working really hard on something, but they're just not getting there. I never shy away from saying, dude, that wasn't good. You got to do it again. Especially if they're serious about music, you're doing a disservice if you sugarcoat things.
Yeah. Well, but it also comes down to if you gonna be honest with them, how you are honest. It's like it's one thing to do what you're saying. It's another thing to be like, you're a terrible musician. What the hell are you doing? Just
There's a
give up.
difference, oh my God. I mean, there's a difference between abuse and
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
pedagogy.
And I think that that line gets kind of blurred, like you said, because teachers want to sugarcoat things and want to be supportive, but and don't want to rock the boat, so to speak. But no, I agree. I do think you need that kind of thing to, I don't think I had strict enough teachers because I mean my practice regimens, I basically succeeded in spite of myself. That's the way I like to put it. Because I'm naturally lazy and terrible. But I'm naturally lazy, so practicing never came good to me. But you find ways, or if you're serious about what you're doing, you find ways around that. And that's what I'm realizing now, is that I found ways around it that I didn't realize were practicing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we like to put practice routines in boxes. You do this rudiment, you do the scale, you do this arpeggio, you do the exercise, you do the piece. It's like,
Pretty
it
much.
gets old real fast. And I don't know about you, like my mind doesn't work well on those boxes.
No,
So.
it doesn't. Mine either. The worst sound for me is the stupid metronome. Like when I would take the
I'm
metronome.
addicted.
Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that because I do use it. I mean, obviously, I use it when I'm recording things, uh, but yeah, when I was practicing, I was just like getting lost. Just like,
Yeah, I mean, the metronome too can be a meditative tool. Like, I was
that's true.
really resistant to the metronome when I first started working with it. But when you integrate it with yourself in such a way and you're listening to it and you're internalizing it and you're not anticipating it, but you're expecting where it's going to be,
Yeah.
practice it becomes a bit of a meditative practice. And
Oh yeah.
so the relationship with it can change because I've been there where it's just like,
Yeah.
stop, and it just keeps going. But I maybe try something new with it
Oh
and
yeah.
just, yeah.
Well, no, that's a good tip. Uh, Develop a relationship with your metronome.
Yes, a positive one.
Yeah, yeah. uh, well, and what you're saying also brings you up to my next point. Where did you end up going to college?
So I went to Berklee for
Oh, okay. I
undergrad.
thought you were,
Yeah,
but I wasn't sure.
yeah, I was a Berklee kid
Okay.
through and through. Yeah, and I graduated, and then I went to actually back to what's now Berklee. It's the Boston Conservatory. I went there for my master's program in composition and theory. Did a lot of
Oh,
cello there too. Yeah.
oh, okay. And how did you find? Because I think Berklee. Because I used to work at Berklee, not in the financial aid office, not in the not a
Mhm.
guitar thing, but I always found it interesting how they wanted to stay current with things because right as I was leaving Berklee was when they introduced the DJ guy who was
The
like
DJ
showing
guy.
yeah the DJ guy who was trying to and it was just funny. It's like it was when they introduced turntabling as a course, and it was like this. I hate to say this old white guy with
Oh
glasses
no.
standing around standing around turntables. But I guess I never. Most of the Berklee people I know are guitar players or bassists or drummers or things like that. How was the approach for cello at Berklee? Because is it very like a conservatory esque kind of vibe, or is it a little no?
It's it's different. It's beautiful. At least when I was there, and this was, mind you, over 10 years ago at this point. I'm dating myself here, but I got there, and no, the strings program was really really strong when I was there, and they, as in typical Berklee form, you could, if you chose to, practice classically, and you had fantastic instructors if you wanted to do so. But the paths that string players took were mostly jazz, rock, pop, punk, even. Like they
Yeah,
took their own avenues with it, and that's, I hate to say it, that's what really helped a lot of these string players' careers because they were not boxing themselves into the path of, I need to join an orchestra and make a salary and be taken advantage of by an orchestra because it's a really really dog eat dog world out there with those. And but they weren't, you could, if you wanted to, you could, and that's a beautiful thing. But my path was, I studied metal, and that was my dedicated practice, and that was my course of study there, and there
yeah,
was plenty to learn from and plenty of incredible metal instructors to take coursework from.
yeah. And so, when does metal come into the equation for you?
Oh, actually, yeah, that was way early too. I really got into Metallica when I was like 4 or 5, and that was with the encouragement of that teacher. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that metal was, this cultural phenomenon, and I just thought it sounded great, and I loved the timbres, and I loved the way of playing it. So, I mean, along with playing Suzuki when I was little, I was trying to learn like Metallica riffs, and it just evolved from there. And I got into punk, and I think high school is when I really took off practicing metal and practicing those rhythmic rudiments and bow techniques and trying to figure out where is the parallel between my classical bow technique. Bow technique is the right hand,
Yep.
which is integral to any metal that you're playing on a string instrument, and matching that with my classical upbringing. And there is so much in common. I think in order for me to have developed playing metal on a string instrument, my classical training was absolutely necessary because it's the control and it's the consistency that you need. Because on a guitar, for example, you hit something, on a bass, for example, you hit something, and depending on how hard you hit it, depending on where you hit it, it's going to change the timbre,
Yep.
but not a ton. That depends on what you're plugged into. That depends on your string gauge. So many other factors play into that. On a string instrument, you are 1 millimeter low, you are 1 millimeter high. That's going to change the sound.
Wow. Okay.
And, depending on the ratio of how much hair of the bow is hitting the string, depending on the angle of that hair to the string. Even if you're running through, what I run through, a Savtech half stack, MiG 100, it's still going to change the timbre significantly. So having that, that classical training really influenced the way that I can play metal.
All right. That's cool. This is fascinating. This is all the stuff
Thank you.
I wanted to learn about you.
Thank you.
Um, and so when you went from the Berklee experience to the Boston Conservatory, how how different was that? And I mean, was there a difference because now you're going for your master's? Was there more expected of you? What I know it was in composition, but was what was those two educational experiences like? I guess the difference, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, extremely different. I think for grad school, I definitely wanted to work in a more traditional conservatory environment to really nail down the compositional techniques, the history, the theory, really diving into the, you know, new music of what I wanted my music to sound like. And it was I would say it's pretty traditional for a conservatory. Berklee was all over the place. I mean, it was just like a buffet of whatever you wanted to learn. It was there for you. And if you wanted to slack off and smoke weed every day, which a lot of us took part in instead of going to classes, you could, and you could still pass and graduate. But at the conservatory, it was very much, it was stringent. It was strict. But for that reason, I think I got the training that I needed. It was a short 2-year program for a master's. It's packed. You're expected in that program to have a certain number of performances you put on each year. The music is graded and judged on a much more sophisticated scale, I'd say, than an undergrad. And the way that you were criticized was also more in depth and more related to the history of your chosen, I don't want to say genre because it's just a really strange word for new music, but your chosen path, your chosen timbres, your tonality, if you have that. And it was very, very different.
Okay. And if you're going when you're going for your master's for composition, what are kind of you know I know there's ways like you said judging performance, but how are they judging your progress as a composer, and what are the expectations? Like, what do they expect you to master all the different forms, like the normal forms, or what is what are the expectations, I guess?
Yeah, so I think in going into that, they expect you to have a thorough knowledge of formal structure. They would have expected you to write a fugue, something in sonata form. Your basic structures and all of your Western music theory. Going into it, you should already have that coursework done. So when you get
Okay.
there, it's pretty subjective, I'd say. I mean, depending on who is on the panel judging your compositions, their responses are going to be different. And I think in the conservatory world, there's a kind of a problematic effort to make the judgment of these pieces objective. And music is subjective. As much as you want to put it in a box and judge it on certain criteria, it's going to be subjective. So the way that they judge your progress is what are you doing new between your last piece and this piece? What's new compositionally? Are you working in different instrumentations? Why did you choose those instrumentations? And I think the why is probably how they're really judging. If you have a reason why, because undergrad and you're just kind of trying stuff, throwing it at the wall, seeing what sticks, seeing what sounds good, what people like. But in grad school, it's really like, what's your purpose? What's your process? How is that process evolving? What do you need
Yeah.
to say?
Yeah, it sounds like in addition to what they're really doing is trying to develop what is your intention as a composer.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
because yeah, because if you think about like 20th century music, for example, and you think you like I'm bringing it up just because he's the stereotype, but you're John Cage, like like
Love.
what's the intent of 4 minutes 33 seconds? Because if he was in a composition program and said, oh, I'm just going to sit here
Mm-hmm.
and like how do you explain that? And I think you're right, it's how do you explain the usage of what you're doing, like why do you put four radios in different corners and turn them all on or something like that,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
um so that, and again, because it is subjective, but it's kind of like when you go to a museum and you like see artist statement, where the artist yes, you're supposed to be able as a listener or viewer to engage with the art and find your own interpretation, but but sometimes, like, why are there just lots of blue on the wall, and it's just, and that's where the artist comes in and says, well, this is what I'm doing. So that makes sense to me, that that's what they're trying to gauge and see if you see how you're evolving, I guess, in that way as a composer, as opposed to, you know, what meters are you using? What what
Mm-hmm.
instruments?
100%.
And so, just to kind of deviate for a second, because I go off on tangents a lot. Um, are there other instruments? I know you're a vocalist, and we'll get to that too. But are there any other instruments that you play besides cello? Was there any instruments that you picked up to learn, or is it just cello?
Just cello.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
messed around on bass guitar for a bit. It was really fun. I love playing bass guitar, but no, cello. That's it.
Okay.
And screaming. Yeah.
That's great. um, and well, that's a good segue. When does singing or screaming come into the come into the picture?
Oh man. Well, yeah. I mean, I studied opera through high school with an instructor named Marla Berg in Cleveland, and yeah, I was really into Italian opera, and I was singing, yeah, a lot and competitions, and it was
Oh,
really intense. And then I realized a lot of what I was listening to was not opera. In fact, I don't really like listening to opera at all, but that was what I had my training in because that was the classical path. And like cello, how the classical technique informs metal technique, classical technique in vocals informs metal technique there too. So, I approached my teacher, who again was very progressive for a classical person, and I was like, hey, I want to scream. How do I do this safely without hurting myself? And she was like, I have no idea. Good luck. Don't hurt yourself. Don't get nodes. So I started just experimenting with my voice and using those breathing techniques because, I mean, if you have the foundation, you can go from there. And I was pretty quick to pick it up, but I mean, I had a lot of help along the way. I had the Zen of Screaming DVD set, of course,
I've
from
got that
Melissa
too.
Cross.
Yeah.
Yes, it's fantastic, and it's all aligned too. I remember bringing in that DVD to share with my opera instructor. I'm like, just give it a watch. Let me know what you think. See if this is safe. And she's like, I don't want to do any of this, but it seems sound. So go
Okay.
for it if you want to. So slowly I started building up those muscles and yeah, eventually started screaming my head off.
And and were you in bands in high school where you got to
Yeah.
practice this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was in some pretty hilarious bands in high school with some friends. Nothing serious at all, but yeah, just trying to play cello and scream at the same time. And in college it sort of fizzled out. I didn't want to do as much like cello with vocals, but now that's coming back. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, after listening to the new EP, I was like, or the new, is it an EP or a record? It was like 30
for
minutes. Yeah.
for Angel Grinder,
No, no, no,
what's
for
it?
the thing that you're gonna release next year.
Oh yeah, that's
Sorry.
that's an EP.
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
like, which one? Yeah, yeah. That one is, I guess, an EP. It's like, yeah, a little under 30 minutes or something.
Okay, I thought it was, but I never want to judge things because because whatever. Slayer's Rain and Blood was 32 minutes. I don't think, I never know what the actual you
I
know.
don't know. We could call it an album. I still don't. It's a block of sound, and we can call it an album. We can call it an
Yeah.
EP.
It's awesome. We can
Thank
say
you.
that.
Thanks so
um
much.
and cool. And so then, okay, so you said you weren't really doing as much when you were in college, and so was it after you finished your masters that you kind of started looking for bands to play with, or when you left the master's program, let me say, like, what was your kind of career path? Were you looking at teaching, or was there other things you were interested in doing?
Yeah. So after the master's program, I was very much interested in composing, and I was interested in teaching, obviously. But more so, I was feeling a little bit burnt out, as a lot of us are after a grad school program, and I wanted to have fun with music again because I felt like I hadn't really had fun with music for a while. And yeah, I started practicing for fun, and I saw Scaphism, who I was a huge fan of, was having auditions, and I was like, there's no way. This is funny. I'll practice it because I haven't practiced screaming in 10 years, so may as well just like get in shape and have fun with some people and like enjoy the process, whatever that looks like. So I started practicing, and they had like a couple songs for the audition, and I didn't expect to get in. I didn't expect to make a go of it, but it was really that was a strange one. I just wanted to have fun. I didn't want to make money with it. Didn't need to. Like it was just wasn't like who's gonna make money screaming? Like who's
Yeah.
gonna make a career out of that? But yeah, I walked into the audition. It was just like it didn't feel like an audition. It felt like a rehearsal. It was like
Oh, okay.
this is my band, and now I'm a screamer or whatever. Now I'm an extreme vocalist.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Shouts out to Scaphism. I was there for the beginnings of that band because I lived with Evan for about a year back in
Oh man.
2006, 2007, where his first band ended, and he was like, start to develop these new ideas. And lo and behold, Scaphism was born.
There it
And
was.
and did you find it? Um, Let me try to think of the best way to put this because I just to make sure I'm delicate about it. But I feel like Scaphism before you. I mean, obviously Tony as a singer and as a live performer was very energetic, and I think and so when you stepped into the role, how did you find doing gigs with them? Did you find that people were receptive? Because I mean, you're an amazing performer as well. So I just was curious how that process was for you.
Man, I mean, it was just, I approached it with the perspective of I'm here to have fun.
Hmm.
Like, I take the music seriously and I take the execution seriously, but whatever I do with them, it's going to be in the spirit of scaphism, of being in that mindset, which
Yeah,
is different than any other band mindset I'd ever been in before. But yeah, I just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to be myself and be loud. And thankfully, like a lot of their audience, there were some protests that oh, it's like PC scaphism with their female vocalist now, like which was funny to me. But the reception was fine. I mean, people liked it. It's still the same music. It's just a different human screaming it.
yeah, yeah, and it's uh, and and your I know I said this before to you, but you terrify me. Your singing terrifies me legitimately.
Thank you.
Uh,
It's a compliment.
yeah,
It's
which
a
is
high one.
funny because you're so nice. But even listening to the new EP, I was just like, I was just kind of like, like here, I'm like, am I okay? um,
I'm glad.
yeah, it kind of reminds me. I don't know if you know the band Conate at all.
I
Did you?
don't. Mm-mm.
Do you know Sun
Oh
Sun
yeah.
Oh, Stephen O'Malley? So Conate was one of his other bands, and they were I classify them as doom metal, but I don't know if they necessarily fall into that traditional. But it was just like a lot. Well, sorry, it's got James Plotkin was in it too, who
Oh,
mastered your
awesome.
record. Yeah. So, but anyway, their music legitimately terrified me, mostly because of their singer. And then I actually met him for the first time, like a few years ago, and I was just kind of like shocked because I was like, I didn't know what to do because I'm like, because he really is really scary. um, and but again, in person, he was very nice, and we've talked a couple times since then, and I think he's amazing. But
Mhm.
yes, I love that dichotomy. Very nice person, totally terrifying singer.
I love it.
I just want to jump in to say thank you for listening, and here are the ways that you can support us. Subscribe to The Color of Air on your favorite podcast app like Apple, Stitcher, Radio Public, or Spotify, and be sure to rate and review. Also, follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/retcongreg. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/retconindustries, where we have 3 monthly subscription tiers of $1, $5, and $10. Depending on which tier you choose, you will have your name listed in the credits for every future podcast and music release, as well as access to bonus audio and video content, Bandcamp discounts, and exclusive merchandise through the Retcon Swag Club. Finally, please check out all the music up for sale at retconindustries.bandcamp.com. And now, back to the podcast. So in terms of your compositions, so were you just kind of writing things in your spare time? I mean, did you have any, performances or places where you were able to exhibit your compositions?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, yes.
Yeah.
The whole goal with this EP, the first goal was to have, a series of performances, performance arts, performance art, and demonstrations as well, to build in, fold in activism into this album as well. For St. Anthony's Fire, that one I wrote for a performance at the MIT Chapel, which is I forget the word for it. It's not ascribed to any particular religion, but it's a sacred space. So the goal for that piece was to write something that was completely blasphemous, that was completely disturbing, disgusting, horrifying, to really put people in a space of abject, unholiness, really. So the goal, if you've been to MIT Chapel, it's absolutely gorgeous. Eero Saarinen was the architect, and it has this gorgeous marble pulpit and brick walls and this, I don't know what to call it, an installation, a chandelier behind the pulpit that's these metal rectangles that cascade down from the ceiling, and you look up at the ceiling, and it's a beautiful, beautiful space, and it's circular. So I wanted to surround my audience in war drums, essentially, and I wanted. It was a really angry piece. I wrote it when Trump was elected, and not only when Trump was elected, but a lot of power was given to theocratic forces and oligarchic forces, and I was really against that, obviously. So I wanted to write something that was blasphemous. So I surrounded the audience in 3 drum sets, and then I was on the pulpit with my Savtech in this cloak and just being a fucking weirdo, like I love to do. And and it was scary. I mean, it was extremely loud. We didn't really warn for earplugs, and it was really quite unholy. And I just screamed. I didn't have a mic, so I was just screaming over the drum sets and screaming over the cello. So that piece was created for that space. And I think, that's all the pieces on that album are special to me, but that one really holds a special place in my heart. Is probably the first piece of music I've written from a place of activism with that in mind.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's gonna see, now that I'm hearing that, now I'm gonna go back and listen to it again and see where, because I mean, I could, I mean, I mean, I loved the timbre of everything. I loved the way everything kind of plays out. But yeah, that makes sense that you looking at it in that regard. So when So when did the idea then uh come to like record it? Was it, so like you said, it was obviously it was pre-COVID when you were working on this, but was it, was the idea to record them live in these different spaces and then put that out, or was it just you're performing and then eventually put something out? I guess I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to answer that too because I really gravitate toward recording live performances and releasing those, making things feel spontaneous. But I think in collaborating with the co-producer and the mixing engineer of this record, her name is Miranda Serra, and she's just everything I would ever want in a collaborator, in a producer, and it felt natural to commit these things to recording with her because it was just full trust. Like anything she does, I'm just like, it's all you, baby. Like just put it on, record it, press go. So I think the idea for recording it in, a formal studio setting really came from that organic process that her and I cultivated.
Oh, okay, cool. And and just to step back for a second because I just kind of glossed over something. So let's talk about Angel Grinder.
Oh, my love. I love Angel Grinder.
Yeah. So yeah, like what, like, I mean, I think that was kind of my first proper introduction to you, just because I was in the band with Joe as well, or in a band with Joe as well. So what was the process for Angel Grinder?
That one, ongoing journey with that band. So Dan, he had this band, and it was pretty much him and Joe, and they were out of vocalist, and they were really anxious to play some shows, and I was like, yeah, I'll step in, why not? It'll be fun, and it was like too fun. It's like it became something that I wanted to do more. I didn't just want to like play shows. I'm like, what if I was in this, which is something I had never expected to do, be a vocalist full time for not one but two bands. Very
Yeah.
strange. And yeah, it just evolved and joined it, started writing lyrics for it. We recorded our full length in, I think it was 2020. We released it. And yeah, it's kind of, in a similar spirit to Scaphism. It's something that I do because I love it and it's fun. And I love the people who are involved. And I mean, playing with Joe, like, as you know, it's so much fun. Like, he's just such a beautiful human being and just such a good drummer that, like, anything with him, like, every rehearsal was just a great time.
Yeah, yeah. Dad. Good old
Daddy.
Dad Joe.
So
And
fucking weird.
yeah, I know. And this is probably going to come out like way after this fact, but and congratulations to him for just getting engaged. I think
Yes!
that's
It's really, really beautiful. Yeah, it's very exciting news.
yeah. And so now to pivot back to the EP a little bit, because this was something it's probably just because from a guitar playing production standpoint, and I know you had mentioned, when trying to play, or not trying to, but when you were figuring out how to play like the kind of metal stuff on the cello, what, kind of, I mean, did this EP, like, did you introduce new techniques into like, because the cello performance, I mean, it does sound like a living, breathing, monster guitar riff machine, but I know it's cello. So I mean, like, what techniques did you kind of adopt for the EP?
Yeah, so, man, I mean, maybe I should rewind. So in Corpus Vice, there are three pieces that have cello on it. There's a Threnody,
Mm-hmm.
there's St. Anthony's Fire, and then there's Corpus Vice.
Mm-hmm.
So for the Threnody, that one, oh man, that one was a process. That one was fully improvised. And then Miranda and I kind of came together and pieced parts of that improvisation together into what the piece is now. But as far as technique, I think I was just having a bad day. I just really took it out on my instrument that day. And that one, I think that was thoroughly influenced by the sound of the space we were in, too. So, if I'm in my bedroom, for example, it's pretty dry sounding. If I'm improvising, I'm going to use techniques that, are more conducive to a space like that. But because of the room was so large and it was so reverberant, I was encouraged to use techniques that were that took space and time. So if the snap pizzicatos that you hear, for example, those I really ripped on the string because I knew they would be bouncing off of the walls at different rates. I knew that my instrument would respond differently. The beating, the resonant frequencies in that room would be responding to the way that I hit that string. And then you'll hear like a lot of like what I call air bow. So it's just barely any pitch and it's just like rushing sound. And that sounded so nice in that room too because the delay, the reverb in that room was probably like, we timed it was like 11 seconds.
Oh,
It
wow.
was long reverb. And so I was just playing around with like, it was almost as if the room itself was accompanying me. So I could really get away with a lot in that space. And fun fact about that one, actually, I'm not going to say where it was recorded, but Miranda and I did trespass on a space in order to use it because I kept trying to get in touch with them. And I was like, hey, it was a religious space, I'll say that. I kept trying to get in touch. I'm like, hey, I want to record there. And like no one was getting back to me. And it was one of those sorts of spaces that was kind of tied off to like those that were kind of in like the cool kids religious club, I guess, or whatever. And I was not one of those, just a person who lived in the area. So we snuck in and recorded it, and we got caught, actually. And
Oh, wow.
I like played dumb, like, oh yeah, we talked to, I made up a name, I was Raul or something. Like, yeah, we talked to Raul, like, we had the space from 2 to 4, like, I don't know, I guess there was a miscommunication. And they were like, oh, all right. And they were just like, get out of here when you can. So thankfully it happened after we were recorded and we were all wrapped up. But yeah, it's my favorite thing that happened in the production of that album.
That's awesome. That's amazing to hear. Um, and you brought up that 3 of the 4 have cello on it, and I think that's why I asked if you had played any other instruments, because listening to the second Threnody, I was kind of like, okay, is this her playing or is this her composing for somebody else to play? Um, and I was curious about that because I picked up on, and this comes from the Jethro Tull fan in me, especially with was it a flute that I'm
Yeah.
hearing? Yep, that's a. I never want to say with certainty because in case I'm wrong, but
I'm often wrong.
okay, but I was noticing the way that the breaths became part of the piece, and now, I guess, who played that, and then also what was how, when you were composing that, how did you communicate the vibe you wanted, or was that something that in collaboration with the performer?
Yeah. So first, I'm obsessed with flute. Like it is my favorite instrument to write for, and it has been for years now. There's just so much timbrely you can do. Like even from Jethro Tull, the amount of sounds you can produce on this one metal stick is just unfucking real. It's just an absolutely beautiful instrument, and ugly too. It can be really ugly, which is remarkable. So the performer I wrote that for. Her name is Antonina, and she's absolutely brilliant, Polish flute player, and she has an immense control over her breath and over her body in general. She's one of those performers that just absolutely command the air around them. And when she plays, it's almost like the air is just sucked out of the room, and you're just like, oh my god, like I'm in the space of something just massive. And so anytime I'm writing in general, I like to write for the performer. I don't like to necessarily write in general and then just throw it at people. If I can, that's why I love commissions so much, because you know who you're writing for and you know their voice.
Right.
But yeah, that was, the composition of that piece, I took into mind what sounded incredible that she did, and there's so much that sounds incredible that she does. And I arranged the sounds around, a very set form. So it was a little bit more of a, I don't want to say like, it was a piece that was around the form that I wanted it to be finalized into. And then I gave it to her and I said, do what you do. Everything's notated, everything's here. Take liberties. If something is not idiomatic, tell me, I'll change it. And yeah, it was, we got into the studio. I don't think I'd heard her play it before. I think we had like one session where, we just chatted about some of the techniques and some of the things I had written, just clarifying whatever. But we got into the studio and that was the first take that you heard. She owned it, and it's a really dark piece. It's just for solo flute, and I'm curious as to, what came out when you listened to it. Like, what did you sense?
I mean, I'll have to listen to it again to give a probably more accurate. I guess what I was hearing, what I was drawn to was the breathing, because it was the space in between the notes, because I felt that's what kind of like, I know it emphasized the notes to me and made it more, I don't want to say real. I feel like that's a terrible word, but terrible way of explaining it, at least. But it just like, yeah, it had this kind of organic, living, breathing aspect to it, which, I can't say I had an exact images in my head. Also, I should say I was listening to it while I was playing the Blasphemous video game, so
I love it.
so I'm already, and so it was a great soundtrack to it. But so yeah, so I guess like my imagery is I'm watching this religious sort of character bloodying up people, and it was the perfect soundtrack to that. But really, as a musician, I honestly, the breath, like I know it sounds strange, but it was, to me, like that's, like you said, it's one of the beautiful things about the flute is, and just is those different kind of timbres you can get. And I don't know, that was the thing that originally kind of got me. I was like, oh, okay. Hopefully that's a okay explanation, not a
Of course. No, that I love that explanation. Yeah, I mean, the breath it's just so important. I mean, to music in general, silence, breath, the space in between is like more important than the sounds a lot of times. So I really love that you heard that. And I don't think real is a bad word for that. I think
Okay.
it's human. Like, we breathe and we have silence, and
Yeah.
it's important.
Okay. I just meant, just not in terms of like saying, well, it sounded like fake flute playing or something. Yeah.
Just a MIDI.
I know. That's my way of composing, and that's my albums have the fake MIDI on it. But,
It can be good.
Yeah.
It can be beautiful.
And one other thing, I know we're talking a lot about this EP, and hopefully by the time this interview comes out, it will be available, and
Yes.
or if not, at least we can promote it.
Thank you.
And so when I noticed, when you put out the Bach piece earlier in the month, or last month, I guess at this point, and I noticed, like, you had a very focused aesthetic to what you were doing with your Bandcamp. You had really good photos, really good, what was your, going into this, did you come into it with like a way of how you wanted to market it?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean,
Yeah, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. We just like write music, put it on Bandcamp, there you go. but
Hmm.
like what is your kind of vision? Because you also said you worked on a music video for it as well. So
Yeah, yeah. So the music video, that one's gonna be hopefully out soon. I'm just gonna put it up on YouTube soon
yeah,
and just call it a day. But marketing is very important, and that is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think, all artists should really pay attention to, because there is a habit, and I'd been in that habit before, of just writing something, throwing it on the internet, seeing what sticks, expecting whatever expectations you want to put on it, or paste onto it. But I think for that one, I was feeling really spontaneous that week. I had a premiere of that one on YouTube from this music school, actually, called Community Music Works. And I was a little, like, maybe like trepidatious is the word, because most of the other pieces on that program were really accurate, beautiful interpretations. Well, you can't say accurate because it's Baroque music and no one knows what it really sounded like, but they were really, you know, good interpretations of Bach. There was an organ piece on it. There was a horde of violists playing just absolutely perfect. Like, it was a gorgeous program on YouTube. And then there was this really blasphemous piece. I feel like blasphemous is like the theme of the day, thanks to that video game. I love it. But yeah, and the response was really interesting, and folks seem to resonate with people, and that was really just like a bedroom experiment. And I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna sit down with my instrument. I'm gonna put one mic up. I'm gonna throw some convolution reverb on it, and it's gonna be a lot, probably. But yeah, for the marketing of it, I was like, I had these great photos that I took with my friend Gwen Woolley. You know Gwen.
yep,
And I was like, you know what? I don't really have like a thing to promote through these, and these photos look a lot like this piece. They look a lot like how this sounds. So I'm like, maybe if I put this on Bandcamp with that photo of me that we took with like a really slow shutter speed and like a white dress, and I was like shaking all over the place. It was a really fun process to take those photos with her. Maybe that this visual will tie into this sound, and it will help people resonate with it. And that was really the goal behind it, because like marketing, this is something I'm trying to get past, like, personally, and I think a lot of artists have this problem. It just feels icky.
yep.
But I think like part of that, this is way TMI. I was talking to my therapist about this, actually. Because I was like, I hate promoting myself. I don't feel like why should I have to sell myself? That's gross. Like, and she's like, you are doing everyone a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice. You're disrespecting yourself by not putting in the effort, the marketing effort, the sales effort into making this hit ears. Because, with music, like, it saves lives, quite literally. Like, you could write something and it could be the reason that someone's alive the next day. And to not market it and to not get it out as much and as effectively as you can is like, really disrespectful in general.
Yeah.
So, like, marketing this piece, I was trying to think, what's going to help people connect to this? What can I say? How can I make this appear that will help in general?
Okay. Well, I'm so glad you said that, because that really resonates with me a lot, because I am the same. I'm like, why? I don't want to be so full of myself that you know, listen to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the word, and I guess this comes from also having a corporate day job, but the word that scares me the most is branding.
Mm-hmm.
What's your brand? Everybody needs a brand. And branded content, like all these things
Mm-hmm.
that we hear now in regards to artistic endeavors, and that grossed me out. Like, I just
Yeah.
never wanted to think of myself in that way. But I guess at the end of the day, we are brands. We are our own brands, for what lack of a better word. and and yeah, you're right, you do a disservice. It's something that I'm noticing too with um because that was my approach, just throw stuff up on the internet, and lo and behold, like, my solo stuff doesn't really gain a lot of traction. It's just kind of, you throw it up there and you hope someone discovers it, and boom, there you go. um Whereas I looked at, the new KO record that I was on,
Which
and
is fucking incredible, by the way. I
oh,
love that record.
thank you. I really was. I wasn't necessarily fishing for compliments on it.
But it is
No,
like
thank you.
funny story. Sorry to tangent again, but I didn't know that you were in that band, and I've been a fan of that band for years. And
Oh,
like I
okay.
just like I looked in the new album, like that guy looks familiar. Oh, I was like very excited. Like it was like that scene in Elf or whatever where he sees Santa and he's
Oh,
like
yeah.
him. Like that's what it felt like.
I appreciate that. I mean, I should also add, I mean, I haven't been in that band for 15 years. Like, this is the first. It really did not start off in that regard. Like, it was more in 2020, summer of 2020. We're all just sitting around, you know, doing. I was doing live streaming, and Toby was just kind of like sending me stuff, being like, well, I want to do this kind of metal record. I hear your style of playing on this. And I was like, okay, cool. Not really knowing what it was. And then it wasn't until October, where it's like, of 2020, where it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be the new KO record. But here's the thing, it's not going to come out till next October.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just kind of like, okay, I guess I'm on the new KO record, but I can't talk about it. So
Yeah.
back to life, back to normality. And then it's like, oh, we're going to do band photos. All right, cool, whatever. And then, yeah, it was like, again, like, not realizing there was this whole marketing approach, which Prophecy Productions was, and Toby too, to a large extent, was taking into account. And it makes a difference. I mean, it made the record seem important. It would, seem more important. And and that was cool. And the responses that people have gotten is really cool. And it's kind of made me think about doing this, because I've been doing like this dungeon synth stuff, and this other synthesizer and stuff. And again, just throwing it out there, hoping for something, and then working on this new dungeon synth record, which has become not much of a dungeon synth record. um Dungeon guitar record is what I would rather call it.
Nice.
And it, realizing that, like you said, I mean, it was the intent. As I was recording, as it became clear, I was like, oh, this is something I feel is important to me as a composer or as a writer. And yeah, like, I could just throw it out there. I mean, people are watching me compose it live on Twitch anyway, but then the idea was like, well, no, if I'm going to release this, I want to make it seem important. I want to give it a chance. And that's why I had mentioned to you, I was like, I want to make a video for something. I want to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take promo photos. I want to,
Yeah.
like, well, and that was the thing. Like, I mean, just, doing promo photos of myself in my basement here, and my cloak.
Love it.
We all wear cloaks.
Yep.
uh, um, and because I noticed that, even with the solo stuff that I was just, I found like an aesthetic, and yeah, it's, and this isn't me just wanting to talk about myself here. It was just more just me kind of being able to say, yeah, I agree with what you're talking about, that there is an importance to it. And with your new EP, that seems like, do you have kind of a big plan for it?
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, like your music is important. Like the marketing too. Like our egos make us feel like, oh, we have to make it seem important, but it is important. Like it's important that people hear this, and it's beautiful. And I mean, the KO that is gonna be, if enough ears get on it, it could be an iconoclastic for the metal genre. It's really pushing boundaries, bending genres in ways that haven't been bent before, and it's a really important record. But yeah, I mean, for Corpus Vice, like, yeah, like, there have been many plans, and all of them have changed. And I think a lot of it was that resistance to promoting it. I mean, this stuff has been mastered now for 2 years,
Yeah.
just sitting on my hard drive. And occasionally I get an ask from a performer like, "Hey, when's that gonna drop? Like, we recorded this 3 years ago." And I'm like, "Oh, I have this big plan, and I crossed out half of it yesterday in a fit of rage." But I mean, it's developed, and I think at this point, I have a plan, and I'm gonna just stick to it. Some of it's not gonna work. Some of it will work better than I anticipate. And whatever it is, it's going to be a learning experience because, as much as the brand development aspect, it's nauseating to think about. But at the same time, like, if we put different names on it, like a rose by any other name would smell as gross, or whatever the phrase is, like,
Yeah.
if you call branding something else, like, this isn't branding, this is, I don't know, trying to think of something nicer than branding. Like, there's plenty of words that are nicer than branding. But if you call it, I'm at a loss. But if you call it something else, like, and you say, this is my way of transferring what's in my soul
Hmm.
and what's important to me to help someone else, like, increase their quality of life for 32 minutes or whatever, then I have to brand it. I have to literally, and in my branding too for this whole thing, I couldn't figure out what a logo would look like. Like, I was playing with, like, all those, like, metal generators of just
Yeah.
like, what would it look like if it was the dying fetus logo? Like, what would it look like if it was this blah blah blah? And I'm like, what if I just, like, wrote my name down and that became my logo? I'm just like, what? It has to be authentic, and it feels weird if it's not. So what's more authentic than writing my name, making it into a vector, and stamping it on the album?
There you go. Yeah, um that's awesome. And uh, well, obviously I wish you luck with that, and I hope a lot of people listen to it because I think it's really awesome. And compositionally, performance wise, I mean, it's really a great record.
Thank
EP,
you.
album,
I so
chunk
appreciate
of
it.
chunk of time.
Yep.
chunk
Accurate.
of chunk of time captured in an audio format. Um so I guess, what aside from that, I mean, obviously COVID destroyed everything for a lot of people. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what are kind of your goals? I guess now that we're recording this on January 2nd, what are your kind of goals for what you want to do musically in the coming year?
Yeah. Oh, this will be a fun time capsule.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. I'll set the bar low and hopefully we go above it.
Yeah.
No, but I think, just recording music, recording more. I do a lot of recording, like, I do a lot of session work, but I think, following this Corpus Vice album, I want to get going on something else, something to really follow it in a strong way. And I've been so much in my cocoon for years now, just like honing this, whatever this is, and this lack of genre, this noisy, aggressive, violent thing that I'm making, this weird baby. I think just like, just pushing it further, seeing how far I can push it. Miranda and I, like, we're talking about, doing something else at some point with my solo material, and I can't see myself going with anyone else, so I hope she's still on board by the time this gets out.
Yeah.
But I think, more recorded material, composing more, and yeah, I think, YouTube is probably going to be a pretty big asset, doing more videos, more visual content, because I think what is resonating most, with the ears that I want to get this into is not necessarily the ears, but what's visual. What can I really tie the quote unquote aesthetic to, where people feel that they can be connected to something in more senses than one. I see a lot of artists like Kira McSpice is one I want to shout out. This is not something I personally think of that I would do, but she has a candle line that is absolutely fantastic, and they smell beautiful and they're gorgeous. But they're tied to her music too, so you can listen to what you're hearing and smell it. It's like smell-o-vision. So things like that, being creative, seeing how we can involve people that it isn't necessarily getting them into a room together.
Yeah.
And creating spaces. I mean, like, do you like the music of Alvin Lucier
Oh,
too
I
much?
don't really know very much off the top
Well,
of
I
my head.
think you'd love him. So
Okay.
he really he actually just passed away pretty recently, but he created spaces for listeners that were very different. He had installations in banks, for example, like
Oh, okay.
where it's not really a concert environment, but it forced people to immerse into these worlds, these heterotopiae, if I'll call it that, these places of otherness. And I really want to experiment with that in the digital landscape. So we'll
Oh,
see where that takes me.
all right. Well, that sounds awesome.
Thank you.
And sorry, my mic stand is running away from me. Well, great. And as we're winding down here, where can people find you? The most important question of any podcast.
Thank you. Let me Google myself to make sure I'm saying the right things. So it's edenrayz.bandcamp.com is the easiest place. That's where Corpus Vice will be, along with anything else I release. I'm sure it will be. I have a YouTube channel as well that has like 3 subscribers as of January 2nd. Hopefully we'll have more after this music video. It's just Eden Rayz is my YouTube. And then we're probably going to be on, iTunes and any other place you consume sound.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking this time to do this.
Thank you.
Knowledge, ability, progress, medicinally, more screaming souls. The least number inequities are brand new. Technology is scared. The earth is still a trifling. Till it my left brain, on this side, the future will show it. That is not very great.